So our next speaker is coming along to do his State of the Nation, which is the best, one of my favourite parts of these conferences. He needs no introduction. It's Dr. Peter Brukner.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here, and it's a great pleasure to be back here again. Well, it's been an amazing week, hasn't it? I mean, for those of you who are in the USA or on Mars, you'll know that it's been a pretty incredible couple of nights of football, and even the next night was pretty amazing as well. So as Sam said, this is the third time I've given the State of the Nation talk. 2 years ago in Manchester. So I sort of thought I'd draw a bit of a football analogy, and I might say maybe in 2017, we were sort of 3-0 down after the first leg, and we still had a lot of work to do to really sort of get somewhere. Last year in London, obviously we had Tim Noakes and the rendition of the world's greatest song, and I sort of thought, well, maybe we're making a bit of progress, and maybe it's half time, and we're back to only 3-1 down, and still got a lot of work to do, but there was hope. And so I'll get you to let me know at the end of today where you think what the score is today. All right. You'll remember that slide from last year when I sort of suggested that Britain was the fattest nation in Europe, and I suggested, well, you've solved that problem, and because you're going to leave Europe, and and obviously that happened on March 29th, and it's all gone. Sorry, did I miss something? Or sorry, is that your fault? Is that all right? No, okay, all right. But the good news is that, when you change it from overweight to obese, you're not the fattest country anymore. So there are 2 countries that are actually more obese than you. So congratulations, you have gone from number 1 to number 3, and Turkey and Malta have snuck in ahead of you, 27.8% obesity. That's pretty bad. I just picked up this book outside, Britain is Sick. And I opened up the first page. I got past the photo of David Unwin. That was unfortunate. But obesity will bankrupt the health service unless Britain gets serious about tackling the problem. So there you go. It's in a book. Must be right. Okay. And we know that there are major problems in this country, and things are changing, and that's. It's not a good thing. Okay, and as you can see there, owners who say psychic healers cure their pets is very interesting, and of course there's the lovely Kylie, Kylie Minogue, who not sure what she's doing with that guitar, but anyway. But my daughter actually worked for Kylie as her manager for 3 years, so Kylie's really sort of part of the family. All Australians think Kylie's part of the family. Anyway, sorry, now what I meant to talk about, I got distracted. What I meant to talk about is Britain's child obesity disgrace, and it's among the unhealthiest in the world. And again, we actually beat you here. This is just like all sporting events. We're just slightly better than you, but we're at 8.5%, and you guys are only at 8. But I know you're working hard on it, and I reckon by next year, there's every chance you'll be up there. 10-year-olds having hip replacements. I mean, really, that's incredible, isn't it? And this is a really, I think, really pertinent slide. Let's not blame the kids, and that's a really serious issue that we need to address, I think, because there is a perception out there that what we do is more expensive than the alternative. But, there's a good reason, I guess. Good old Krispy Kremes have got more sugar here than America. McDonald's got, 3 times the amount of sugar it used to have. Children who drink fruit juice are 50% more likely to be overweight. We've been telling people for 40 years that fruit juice is healthy. But even the great Arsenal manager has worked out that one, that he's banned fruit juice from the training ground. But as Robert Lustig said, this is a dinner I was at last year in Sydney with Robert, and he made the very good point that night, and he reiterated it yesterday, that obesity is not the issue, that we really shouldn't be talking about obesity. We should be talking about metabolic health, and I completely agree with that. The media loves obesity, but really what we're concerned about is obesity never killed anyone, but metabolic diseases certainly do. And this is the American figures. This is an amazing study that came out recently that said that only 12% of Americans are by definition metabolically healthy. In other words, 88% are metabolically unhealthy. So clearly, metabolic health is something that we need to address. I love this saying. It's not a new one, but this is Paul Zimmert, who was quoted yesterday in one of the papers. He's actually from the world's greatest city, and he said that the diabesity epidemic, obesity and type 2 diabetes, is likely to be the biggest epidemic in human history. You know, we hear about the great flu epidemic and HIV and all this sort of stuff. I mean, they pale in comparison to this, the diabetes, the biggest epidemic in human history. They're going to look back in 50 and 100 years' time and say, what the hell were they doing? What were they thinking? How did they let this happen? How do we let this happen? How do we as a medical profession let this happen? Sorry about that. I thought at least it's a while to lunch, and sugar was here. You know, childhood diabetes up 40% in 4 years. You know, they used to call type 2 diabetes mature onset diabetes, didn't they? Those of us old enough to remember that, David and I. The rest of you are all too young. You know, they had to change the name because people were getting it younger and younger. That's a sad reflection. And of course, you know, it can be reversed. And, you know, even politicians can reverse it. It's, you know, some would say that's the only thing they can do. But anyway, we won't go. But, you know, never let it be said that, you know, one side of politics will let the other one get away with anything. Because, you know, sure enough, the other side of politics had to match it and, you know, to jump on the low-carb bandwagon. But anyway, that's all right. Sorry, I just meant to put this on before. And, you know, look, there's certainly progress in this country. There's no doubt about it, and you know, largely due to David and his work. But, you know, there's great progress. You know, only 30% less sugar in dairy milk. Wow, that's terrific. And we're all very aware of David's wonderful work. And really, you know, he's been an inspiration to us all. There is certainly work happening in this country, and I congratulate. I mean, you're doing much better than most other countries. I know it's still a long way to go, but all jokes aside, you know, this work on junk food. There's not much that unites MPs, as we know, but you know, this sort of thing is really really good. So congratulations. You know, there seems to have happened to my shirt, actually, but anyway. You know, that's another one. Back, oh, sorry. It's funny, you know. None of my quotes get a laugh, and everyone else's quotes get a laugh. It's terrific. Yeah, it's good. Anyway, that's I quite like that one as well. You've probably seen that before. I don't pretend to be original. I just, you know, pinch everyone else's ideas. All right. So can diet reverse type 2 diabetes? You know, I think, as you know, that the NHS is working on that, and I think there's great optimism. And I think, you know, the diabetes has really been the battleground, and I think it should be the battleground because it's a battle we know we can win. And I think, you know, moving away from obesity to diabetes is a win-win for us. And we know that, you know, pills and surgery are not the answer. And it's not just diabetes. We know that a whole range of different diseases can be helped by dietary measures, by a low-carb diet, by a ketogenic diet. And unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all the evidence. Over the last 12 months, there's been a huge amount of evidence coming out about the effectiveness of the ketogenic diet in a whole range different areas. It's not conclusive. It's certainly a lot of it is pilot data, but there is an indication now that there is a whole range of conditions that can benefit from a ketogenic or low-carb diet. I do want to point out one area that I think is really exciting, and that's the area of mental health. And there's a great group in the world's greatest city, and Felice Jacker is a lady in Melbourne who's run this SMILES trial, and it's one of a number of studies that have shown a dramatic improvement in depression and anxiety with a low-carb ketogenic type diet. And Pratama will be talking more about that later on, so I'm not going to steal her thunder. But I do point out this book that I noticed was on sale outside, that David Bullmore's a professor of psychiatry here in London, and he's wrote a fascinating book about depression and anxiety being a disease of chronic inflammation, like so many of the chronic diseases. It's a fantastic book until you get to the last chapter. And the last chapter talks about how to treat inflammation. And he's got no effing idea. He thinks it's all he could talk about was drugs. So if anyone knows Edward Bullmore and can organise me an introduction, I'd love to go and enlighten him. Zoe, of course, Zoe knows him. And he needs to be enlightened that you don't need drugs to treat chronic inflammation. You need diet and other lifestyle issues. And I can also recommend this book by Felice Jacker, Brain Changer, which is also an excellent book. But as I said, I'm not going to steal Pratama's thunder about that. But it's just one of a range of chronic diseases. We know that the majority of disease now is due to chronic low-grade inflammation. And we also know that dietary changes are one of the major ways in which we can combat chronic low-grade inflammation, along with exercise and reduce stress and all the other things, but diet is the number one factor that can counter this chronic low-grade inflammation. So I thought I'm here to give you a review of what's happened in the last 12 months. So I thought I'd go through the 367 low-carb conferences that have happened in the last 12 months. And I just want to highlight a couple of them. So obviously soon after last year's PHC conference, everyone headed to Zurich for a conference that was organised by the Swiss Re Institute, which is an insurance organisation, and co-sponsored by the British Medical Journal. And the British Medical Journal, through their editor Fiona Godley, we heard about her yesterday, has really done an outstanding job. And well, how about this for a lineup? I'm not sure what Asim's doing there, but the others are quite sort of legendary, really, in the world of low carb. And they managed to get together a fine array of people. This great infographic that I recommend to you that sort of talks about the history of nutrition research came out in the BMJ, and this is all public. Published in the BMJ as a result. And what they did was that they put groups together that were diametrically opposed. They would have sort of the low carbers, with the Walter Willits and so on, and they would get them to sit down and try and agree on things. And it's amazing, when you actually sit down in a group, it's amazing how much agreement there is. We sort of tend to focus on the 2% in which we don't agree on lots of things, but we forget the 98%, like real food, that we all agree on. So it was a fascinating conference, and full credit to Swiss Re and to the BMJ. Then a conference that I was fortunate enough to attend was the Ohio State University, and this is Jeff Volek who convened the conference of Finney and Volek fame. You all know him, and you can see from the lineup up there, it's a pretty impressive group of people up there. And day two, not quite as impressive. There were a couple of duds there, but it was. Tim spoke, and as he was here last year, was inspirational. And I have to be a bit self-indulgent here, in that there's this fantastic photo that we managed to take there with Jeff Volek and Steve Finney and Tim and Nina Teicholz. And more importantly for me, Tim Noakes tweeted this when someone put that photo up on Twitter. Two of these people saved my life, which was Volek and Finney. A third, Nina Teicholz, my career Nina, and was one of the three angels, and along with Zoe. And he said some nice words about me. So that's really very, very special for me, and I apologise for the self-indulgence. And the final conference was Low Carb Denver, which I didn't attend, but you can see, of course, who's jumped in front and centre here. But she'll pretend it was on height, but, it's actually, she just wanted to get in there in the middle. But that's a fantastic conference. If any of you have a chance to do that, I couldn't go this year because I had a wedding I had to stay home for. But next year it's on again, and I think at the end of February in Denver. And I think Zoe and anyone who attended, and David Unwin is there, as usual. Zoe front and centre, David nice and quiet in the back, and that's a great conference to go to. It really manages to attract some fantastic people. So. There are that many conferences out there. There's Low Carb USA, Low Carb San Diego, Low Carb this. There's the Mallorca conference later in the year. So, there's great opportunities. There's so much interest in this area at the moment. But of course, the big news in nutrition in the last few months has been the EAT-Lancet study that was published a month or two ago. That really set the cat among the pigeons. Really, it was a group of articles in the Lancet that basically promoted the idea of an ecologically friendly, environmentally friendly, healthy, supposedly, diet that was going to save the planet. And it got a lot of publicity, and it also got a lot of people who opposed it. So this is from that study. Civilization is in crisis. We can no longer feed our population a healthy diet while balancing planetary resources. For the first time in 200,000 years of human history, we're severely out of synchronization with the planet and nature. This crisis is accelerating, stretching Earth to its limits, and threatening human and other species' sustained existence. Well, we probably wouldn't disagree with that. But what we would disagree with, I think, is their solutions. And these are the people who are promoting the EAT-Lancet. This is a very wealthy Scandinavian couple, Peter Stordelin, who tucked into a 20,000 calorie burger in Las Vegas the week after. Do as I say, not as I do, and travels around in his £20 million private jet, polluting the atmosphere. But he thinks it's all due to the cows. And this is his other half, who is also pretty hypocritical as well. And then there's Walter Willett, of course, who is the doyen of vegan promoters, and he was part of that group. And of course, they don't mention any of his potential conflicts in the paper, and the fact that 30 of the 37 authors were vegan supporters is not mentioned at all. They don't consider that a conflict of interest at all. So, there were so many reports that came out from the low carb community slamming that. I've got a whole sort of folder of them on my computer, and I couldn't even fit them all in. But this is what they recommended. This is the diet that they wanted. They wanted 30% of this. This looks like the American food pyramid, doesn't it? Really, 30% of rice, wheat, and corn. Eggs. I think you're allowed a fifth of an egg a day, and you're allowed one mouthful of hamburger, I think, and all the soy foods and unsaturated oil, polyunsaturated oils, sweeteners. Really, incredibly unhealthy diet, and many people pointed that out. Zoe did a great review of it and pointed out a lot of these issues. And this is the plate. As I said, a fifth of an egg, 2/3 of a fish finger, a 16th of a burger, and all these sort of soy and added sugar and artificial sweeteners. So more sugar than eggs or meat. Really, ridiculous. And yet, this was plastered in every newspaper and every media organisation in the world as the solution to everyone's problems. And as I said, Zoe did a fantastic job of analysing the nutritional aspects of it all, and showed that in so many areas, in sodium, potassium, calcium, iron, retinol, and vitamin D, it was all significantly deficient in all those. Look at the vitamin D. 5% of the daily recommended advice. And this is the advice that the world's greatest nutrition experts are telling us to eat. And even then, when challenged, they admitted, it wasn't meant to be a healthy diet. It was meant to be an environmentally friendly diet. honestly. You're expected to take these people seriously. And, of course, Tim came up with the Achilles heel of the proposal that it cannot be healthy in the long term. And, of course, as it turns out, who are the sponsors of this organisation? But at least to the credit of the World Health Organisation, they pulled out of endorsing this a couple of weeks later when it was pointed out to them by an Italian dietitian that this was not a very healthy diet. So, but the damage is done. That doesn't get any publicity, but of course the diet gets a whole lot of publicity. And the vegans are and as Robert Lustig said yesterday, and others said yesterday, there's nothing wrong with being vegan, but the fact that they're trying to ram it down everyone else's throat is a problem. And they're very aggressive, and they're destroying pie and mash shops, which may not be a bad idea, but they're very aggressive. In Australia, we had a similar situation where militant vegans made life so unpleasant for a cafe owner, and they actually took over the main intersection of the world's greatest city a couple of weeks ago, and brought traffic to a complete halt in Melbourne, which pissed a lot of people off. But they're very aggressive, and they're in your face. So, as was mentioned yesterday, and I don't want to repeat, that there's really 3 reasons why you'd be a vegan. And as I said, I don't have a problem. Many of my friends are vegan, and I still talk to them, but sometimes. But there are the ethical reasons, people concerned about, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, that's absolutely fine. If that's the way people feel, I respect that completely. It's the other 2 that I have issues with. Environmental. I think that there are 2 sides to the environmental story, and we heard yesterday from that magnificent talk from our farmer friend, I think there's good arguments both ways about the environmental impact of veganism, and I'm certainly not convinced that removing ruminants from the world is going to help the environment. In fact, I know it's not going to. And then the third that really I'm absolutely adamant about is it is not a healthier diet. If you're really careful and you supplement and you sort of work out your proteins, you can probably be healthy as a vegan, but you can't be healthier. Because, I think the world's most nutritious foods of meat, fish, eggs and dairy are the best way to get good health. So, yes, ethical is fine, but the other 2 reasons don't win it with me. But as many people point out, the majority of vegans and vegetarians don't last long and eventually come back to eating meat and all of a sudden feel a whole lot better. Now, I just want to briefly, it was mentioned yesterday, but briefly say that one of the areas we've really made progress in the last 6 to 12 months is in the diabetes organisations around the world. And, I mentioned that I think diabetes is a great battlefield for us, and we're winning. We're making some real impact, and we heard yesterday, that the American Diabetes Association and the European Association for the Study of Diabetes came out last year and said that it was time to change on type 2 diabetes. They now recognise that a low carbohydrate diet was safe and effective. And continued the ADA came out again a couple of months, or last month, and talked about the fact that low carb diets are okay. And this is their statement. I won't go through it all because we talked about it yesterday. And there's this very good consensus report that stated things such as a variety of eating patterns are acceptable. Now, that mightn't sound like much, but it's a big step forward. They focus on key factors. Emphasise non-starchy vegetables, minimise added sugars and refined grains, choose whole foods over highly processed foods. That's massive progress. Compared to what was there previously, that's very, very exciting. Reducing overall carbohydrate intake. They still can't mention the F word. They can't actually say that fat's okay, because dietitians, when they graduate, they sign in blood that we're not allowed to use the F word, and they can't actually say that fat is okay. But they'll get there eventually, another 50 years or so. And but they are admitting that carbohydrate and reducing carbohydrate is beneficial. So these things are really, really important, for select adults. I don't know what select means, but that it's okay. So these are really good things. In Australia, the Dietitians Association haven't gone so far as endorsing low carb, but what they have done is that they have stopped taking sponsorship from the processed food industry, which is really quite significant because they've been their major sponsors. So, we regard that as at least a significant step forward in Australia. And as was mentioned yesterday, recently a study group from the Parliament of West Australia, which I think is still part of Australia, but they would prefer not to be, but came over and spent some time with David and Roy Taylor and others, and produced this report, which only came out last week, looking at these recommendations and saying that the management of type 2 diabetes reflects the success of dietary interventions such as the low-calorie diet and the low-carb diet. So, again, we're making slow progress. It's only one state in a big country, but I think it's quite significant from our point of view. And I was fortunate enough to have an article. The Herald Sun is the people's paper in Australia. Has the biggest circulation, although most of them have an IQ of about 30. But it's I was able to get an article published there last week in that paper. And so again, keep chipping away that we're making progress. But as we know, it's a battle, and there are very powerful enemies, and there are people out there, corporations, and so on. We heard yesterday about the effect of big pharma, and big food is just as potent. I saw this article recently. Some of you may have seen it in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the role of dietary sugars in health. And I thought, current scientific evidence does not support the conclusion that dietary sugars per se are detrimental to human health. I thought, that's a bit strange. So I clicked on the author details, and lo and behold, Philip Princes from the Department of Nutritional Sciences, German Sugar Association, Berlin, Germany. Yeah, what a surprise. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing that we have to deal with. You have to dig down and find out these things. It wasn't there in black and white. And there's no doubt that in the States. Despite Nina Teicholz's best efforts to get some sensible people on the Dietary Guidelines Committee, that it's been loaded up with food industry people, and it's very difficult to get anywhere. In Arkansas, they've passed a bill to prevent the sale of cauliflower rice because that was affecting rice sales in Arkansas. So really, it just shows you that money is the only thing that matters. And we heard yesterday about Coca-Cola, and they continue, despite having been exposed on numerous occasions, they continue to work behind the scenes to undermine the good health industry. I was in France on Friday, and just thought I'd drop that as you do, and I picked up my French newspaper, and front page, that's what it said: Santé, comment Coca-Cola influence la recherche, which means health, how Coca-Cola influences the research. So couldn't get away from it. Here I'm having a couple of days holiday, trying to eat lots of naughty things, and there it is. I copped it there. So there are very powerful enemies, as we know. As we know, sugar is everywhere. Even in wine, French wine, that they're adding sugar to the Margaux wines. Disgraceful. Okay, it was a good year, in many ways, for low carbohydrate diets, and there's a huge the most popular Google search in nutrition was keto or ketogenic. Intermittent fasting's become very popular. Look at this, 10%. Paleo, low carb. I mean, this. I hate these terms, to be honest, because really they're all real food diets, and that's really what we should be focusing on. Whether it should be ketogenic or this or that. I mean, real food is what we're about. Look at this. The nutrient blame for weight gain is more than half are blaming sugars and carbohydrate. Now that would have been fats 2 or 3 years ago. So we are making progress. This 16% of Americans are following a carbohydrate restricted diet. That's pretty good. So, I think in some ways, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? Some days I think, oh, great, we're making progress, and the next day, something else happens and you don't. I think this is a big factor. There's continuous glucose monitors here. You'll see my magnificent triceps there. This is a massive breakthrough, because when you wear a continuous glucose monitor, you've got instant feedback on what is happening to your blood glucose. And you can see if you have a bowl of cornflakes or if you have some white bread, you can see it better than any doctor telling you, better even than David's lovely little charts. You can read it on your phone or on your meter and see exactly what's going on. And I think the key moment is going to be when Apple succeed in getting a continuous glucose monitor into their watches, their Apple Watch. I know they think they're pretty close to it. And when that happens, and every person can walk around knowing exactly what their glucose is and what effect that meal or that drink had, I think that's going to be a massive help to us all in that. And I really encourage people just to try, even if they're not type 2 diabetic, if they are, it's fantastic for a CGM. But even if they're not, it's just a really interesting exercise to go through just for 2 weeks, to put that monitor on and see what's happening to your blood glucose when you eat certain things. So I think that's really exciting in the future. Obviously, the Virta group in the US are doing a fantastic job in promoting low carb. You should certainly try and get on their site, read some of their stuff. This is a great piece, came out a couple of weeks ago from Sarah Halberg, looking at all the evidence on these things. A really good paper. Low Carb USA just this week has put out some clinical guidelines, and I'd recommend you look at those too. They're really very sensible, good clinical guidelines. So there's lots happening out there that gives us optimism for the future. And we know that a couple of great things have happened this year. With Tim, we heard from Tim last year, and as he told us that his charges of poisoning young children were knocked out, and then they appealed, and once again he was exonerated. So that's a fantastic story, and I would certainly recommend you read his latest book that talks about that. And Tim, there's another really good article I would recommend to you. Tim's written his thoughts on a 50-year association with the University of Cape Town, and fascinating article that is quite depressing, really, about the politics behind university research. And in Australia, Gary Fecchia, some of you would know, he's an orthopaedic surgeon who got sick of amputating the limbs of diabetic patients and decided to do something about it and started curing their diabetes, and was told he was not, by APRA, our health regulatory body, he was not allowed to give dietary advice. He was not qualified as an orthopaedic surgeon. And now, mind you, most orthopaedic surgeons you wouldn't want giving out dietary advice, but in this case, he was doing a great job. And that sort of went to the highest levels, and Gary actually appeared before a Senate inquiry into APRA, and amazingly enough, he was cleared of those charges. And for the first time in the history of the regulatory bodies in Australia, the regulatory body apologised to someone. I would like to take this opportunity to apologise. No one has ever seen that before. So, again, small steps. And the demand for low sugar products. You'll remember, 40 years ago, when we told the food industry to remove fat, they did it very well, very successfully. They took fat out of foods. Now, the trouble was they put sugar back in, but at least they did it. And now they're responding. The food industry is responding to the demands of patients or customers and reducing the amount of sugar in products in their eyes. We have a campaign in Australia called Sugar by Half, which obviously the aim is to reduce the amount of added sugar. We're making slow progress. We're rolling out an education program into schools, and we're trying to get more funding for a national campaign. But it's still a battle. It takes a lot longer than I thought it would, but we'll get there. We'll get there in the end. And finally, as I mentioned last year, I think we're very fortunate, and in this conference, to be in the presence of some of our heroes, and I think we should pay credit to them. Now, I showed this slide last year, and I was very reluctant to do it again, but I was told by the organiser that if I didn't show this slide, I wasn't allowed to come. So, you know... But Sam, you know, it's a fantastic job with this conference again, and everything you're doing. I think, you know, it's quite a... He really is a remarkable young man, and, you know, it's incredible. And then, of course, you know, there's a couple of other heroes. You know, we heard wonderful talks from Asim and Zoe yesterday, and we're going to have Asim up again shortly. But we're so fortunate to have, you know, it's not easy to sort of stick your head up and you know, there are a lot of people who want to shoot you down, and it requires a significant amount of bravery, I think, to do this sort of stuff. I love following Zoe on Twitter. You know, I love this one. I don't think that obesity is a disease. I think it's a natural response to an unnatural diet. You know, some people have got the knack of summing things up very simply, and Zoe's one of those people. And I think, as I mentioned to you last year, I mean, I don't really have a life, but so sad is my life that the highlight of my week is receiving Zoe's Monday newsletter. And you know, I can't wait till tomorrow, because apparently one of my suggestions of a study to look at is, but really, you know, you should all, and I know she doesn't really make any money out of it, but you know, you should all subscribe to Zoe's Monday newsletter. It's absolutely fantastic the way she analyses research that is far too complicated for the rest of us to, and she does it so beautifully and simply, and we're all greatly indebted. Zoe, you're doing a fantastic job. Keep it going. And then, of course, you know, David Unwin makes prestigious list of influential GP. Well, duh, of course he does. I mean, really, you know, as if that's a surprise. And, you know, we're very fortunate to have such a humble, modest champion who is just so respected all over the world, and we're very excited in Australia that David's coming out in October too, and it'll be a massive success. So, you know, David, everything you're doing with your different, you know, infographics and charts and so on is just, it's remarkable, really, how, you know, a single humble GP in Southport. I know it's close to Liverpool, so it's not too bad, but thank you. But you know, it's one person can, you know, it makes you feel really good, doesn't it? That you're like, you know, a single person can change the way a country treats the most common disease that you have. So, David, I salute you. It's fantastic. And then, of course, our American visitor, who unfortunately had to fly out this morning. He apologised that he couldn't be here this morning, so he's going to miss out on this little plug. But you know, people like Robert. I mean, you know, 8 million views on YouTube. You know, that's 8 million. You know, I get excited when I get 8, and you know, 8 million views is just incredible, and the impact that single video has had is just quite remarkable. So again, you know, we were very fortunate to hear such an eloquent, if lengthy, talk yesterday, and I'm going to be the same, so I'll be in trouble in a minute. So finally, you know, the question I ask every year is, you know, where are we at? We talk about the chasm here, Maloney's 16% rule, that once you get to 16%, you have the innovators. So you've got your, you know, your Robert Lustigs and people like that who are the innovators. I guess, you know, most of us here today are the early adopters. Congratulations, well done, early adopters. You've done well. And, you know, now we've just got to take that move from early adopters to early majority. And I think we're bridging that chasm. There's no doubt about that. You know, every year we bridge that chasm. You've seen, you know, some of the things I've talked about today, some of the progress we've made in the last 12 months to bridge that chasm. So, you know, it's very exciting. And so I'm not sure that we're actually at 4-0 yet, but I know Sir Messi wasn't very happy about that. But, you know, hopefully that's what we've got to aim for, to get to 4-0. So thank you very much, and you'll never walk alone.